Welcome to That RPG podcast, where every great adventure starts with a single idea.
I'm DQ, your friendly neighborhood GM.
I'm Courtney Staples, and I feel so festive right now.
I'm Johnny Long. I am festive, feisty right now. We're here. It's the holidays, right? So we're gonna have a smaller scheduling this month, right? We're only going to put out 3 episodes for December
Because we have a special guest.
but 3 huge episodes because we do have Mr. Keith Emon, who is the author of The Monsters Know What You're Doing, as well as the new book, Making Enemies, which is phenomenal. Check it out, everyone, because it's even as a player only. I mean, Courtney, you can back me up on this. As a player only, it still gives great insight onto how monsters work.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, I feel like even just for writers in general, creators in general, it could be a great resource. Like, you don't have to run a game necessarily, but it gives you a lot to think about.
I was just telling C.R. Rosen about it, in fact, our first guest, because he was a fan of the first book, and I told him, no, this one's very different. It's a theory. It's like the theory behind the practice, and he was very interested.
We're festive. We're having fun. We're just enjoying ourselves. So we're going to cut straight to the chase, and we're going right to Dear GM. And we're making Dear GM a kind of like a letter to Santa, right? We want magic items.
It's almost like, what is it in is it Christmas Carol where they go back in time and there's all kinds of stuff that happens when they visit different time periods? Is that the one?
Like the ghost of Christmas past. Yes, that's
Past, present, and future. Yeah, Charles Dickens. It's kind of, iconic. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that it? Because I don't really, I don't do Christmas that much. My wife brought me back to Christmas.
Are you Jehovah's Witness?
No, well, I was once kidnapped by a Jehovah's Witness, but that's a
Are you
different.
fucking serious?
what?
Well, not literally kidnapped,
Okay.
but basically kidnapped.
It makes the story better if you're a kid.
Yeah, if I lead with that and you're listening.
Mhm.
I got locked in right now.
So, but for this Dear GM, the question is, what treasures do you give to your players? And do you give them things when they're naughty, or do you give them things when they're nice? And the history of magic items is something I would like to talk about because they've had sort of a weird bell curve in terms of naughty or nice as far as how they were distributed to players or how they were treated by GMs. So I'd like to take you on that journey. We're going to touch on various decades from the 70s to the present to get a sense of the barometer of magic items. And then we can just talk about them in general.
If I could just interject really quickly, listeners, if you would like to take a moment to pause, brew some cocoa tea. Actually, if you have cider and Zabrovka vodka, that's phenomenal.
I had a bunch of that on Thanksgiving, actually. Delicious.
Listener, viewer, get cozy. Let Papa DQ tell you a little story about magic items as we sit cross-legged in front of him and interject with our questions.
So I'm going to take you back to the 1970s, before I was born. And in that time, we had the very dawn of Dungeons and Dragons. And I believe, John, you started in the earliest editions, right? When you were a child.
I started actually probably in advanced D&D. I was 83, I think is my first
so you're in
sheet.
the 80s period. All right, great. Well, I've got news for you too.
Well, some of the spillover, it was still fresh. It was the 2024 of its time, but yes.
This was what we now call the OSR. OSR is the reimagining of this time period when magic items were scarce and career defining. So, in that time, coming across a +1 sword was a sort of legendary experience. You might not get a magic item your entire adventuring career. And in fact, from my understanding of that time period, the quadratic nature of mages made it such that fighters could barely keep up with them when they got very powerful. So, you'd have a really pathetic wizard in the very beginning, and then you end up with a ridiculously overpowered wizard. And all along the way, the poor little fighter is just trying to survive. But that all begins to change once we start to leave the period that we know now as the OSR, the original kind of time period for D&D, once we get into the 80s. Now, I never watched the show Let's Make a Deal because I wasn't alive yet. I was born in 1984. But in the 80s, do you tell us about Let's Make a Deal? Because Monty Hall is the guy.
What do you want to know about Monty Hall and the
Everything.
If you want to know about the Monty Hall problem, then we have issues because I still
what we're going to
don't
talk
agree
about.
with it. Okay,
But I need to know about the man.
well, I mean, the whole thing was that you had this audience of people that wanted to be picked out of the audience to participate to possibly win things. So they wear crazy costumes. And so it was an event. It turned a game show into more of a con
A
almost.
spectacle.
Yeah, a spectacle. I mean, it's like not like Maury level, but like, or Jerry Springer would be the predecessor to that.
Oh
but
man, I missed that show. Do you remember that show? I'd watch it like on my way back from school.
I did want to say, Let's Make a Deal does exist again, and it's hosted by Wayne Brady.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, sorry, not to shoot your thing down, but I just and not nothing against Wayne Brady,
Wow.
but I just it was what it was then was such a weird phenomenon that like it's the same thing like $20,000 pyramid exists now, except it's like the 2 million Bitcoin pyramid. Like it's I don't know. Anyway, sorry.
So Monty Hall, salesman. Well, that ties into what was happening in the 80s, the early 80s, as D&D moved away from the earliest editions to what preceded Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So between, and as it began doing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons itself, we had what's called the Monty Hall problem. And that is magic items started to be distributed in abundance to players. So instead of encountering this extremely rare +1 sword, there was a plethora of magic items that you could obtain. And to some, this was criticized as them losing a bit of their wondrousness. So the more magic items in the hands of players, the less rare they are and the less magical they become in their minds. And some people view this as being cheapened. I think at this time period, though, it pales into comparison to where we're going to go, which is the 2000s. But we start to see a lot of magic items appearing in books, and we start to see them to be expected in loot. So when we, defeat monsters and take their treasure, the expectation is that there's some sort of magic to be found. And this wasn't the case like in every RPG of the time. Like this was the case in 80s D&D. In Warhammer, for example, they kept that 70s feel where you might never get a magic item, or if you do, it's extremely rare.
Wait, so I'm sorry. I fucking hate the Monty Hall problem where you choose between two objects and you know that one's wrong and then you're given a third object and you're supposed to switch to that. It makes no sense to me. I know I was right the first time. Why? Is that what you're talking about? No, you're not talking about that.
No. So I actually don't know about that Monty Hall problem.
That's also the problem I was thinking about. I was very confused about where you were.
We're on the different Monty sides of the tracks.
So it was something referred to as a hall, like a hall of loot.
Oh, like loot.
Yes, in an RPG, in the RPG world. And related back to the game show where you win prizes, right? So the idea is that as opposed to obtaining a magic item and being a true victory, you're being handed it in a hall, a treasure.
It's a participation prize. God damn it, I hate myself. It's the full Monty Hall kind of concept, not the Monty Hall problem. Okay.
Basically, I guess the comparison is that that show is cheap in the sense of being glitzy and cheesy, and having too many magic items is glitzy and cheesy. That's the idea.
Okay.
And this started to happen because of the sheer rarity of magic items in the 70s. And then it takes us into the 90s, which had a bit of a reaction to that in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And that is to counter the idea of the cheapening of magic items. They started to have stories attached to them more explicitly in the books, in the sense that, they have lore to be found about them. Some of them are cursed as well. And not that didn't appear in earlier books, but this became a focus, more codified in the rules. We have things like the Book of Artifacts that are introduced, and the concept of an artifact. So a truly legendary magic item it's beyond rare. And things like the Encyclopedia Magica, which starts to consolidate all of the magic items that have been invented in the past decade, a couple decades.
So people wanted more fluff than just their +1.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, understandable. It gets to me for a certain point. I'm just like, give me the mechanic. But like, if it was just mechanics and there was flavor text, eventually I'd be like, oh, what is that? That sounds interesting.
The apex of that, from what I was reading, is there's an RPG called Earth Dawn, which, as it turns out, I think is really the inspiration for attunement in 5e. But the idea in Earth Dawn is that your magic items are so lore rich that in order to unlock their powers, you have to understand the stories behind them. So you'd obtain a magic item, and then the more you understand it, the more power you get out of it. and you had to actually like psychically attune with it to truly get its genuine powers out of it. So Earthdawn was like pivotal in making that a cornerstone like in RPGs. Now at the same time, just like with Warhammer during the 80s, where it didn't care so much about our Monty Hall issue, we'll call it. The Vampire the Masquerade didn't really have magic items in the same sense. It had different focus. So not every RPG had this problem. It's mostly D&D being the through line. We also start to see things like a bit of systemization of how we create magic items. So Ars Magica introduces these really complex laboratory rules for designing magic items. There was magic item creation in D&D, but not to that extent. And then you have like Palladium and Rollmaster giving you these crazy tables to put together magic items and give you more crunch. So that's where AD&D starts to think about story for magic items, and then how do we systematize some of this and codify it into the rules. And that's the period leading up to what I believe, what I refer to as truly the apocalypse of Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh my.
Holy shnikes, the apocalypse.
That is the death of TSR. So this is where I came in. I came in at the tail end of TSR's existence, the 2000s, right?
I always just thought Vampire the Masquerade was just a way for nerds to hook up. Is that it's actually a game?
It is a game, yes.
I heard they use rock, paper, scissors as a resolution mechanic. I've never played it, so I'm probably wrong. I know there's
I've never read it. I don't know anything about it.
I played it a couple times back in college. There was a guy who really liked it, and didn't really want to get laid by anybody. The guy who ran it, I think he had like a very particular vision of what he wanted vampires to be, which is like very high class and fancy and stuff. And I kept picking like the Gangrel clan, which are like the animalistic ones that like have claws and just like rip people apart. So that was basically my experience playing it. It was doing brutal animalistic things and feeling like the GM was not approving of said things.
You don't need magic items for what you were doing.
Yeah.
But that's the thing though, like in that, from what I understand, Vampire, and Courtney, you played it, so I'm speaking completely out of my ass right now. But I understand Vampire the Masquerade is not it's more of a role-playing game. Like it's more about like the creating the social dynamics. I mean, there are mechanics obviously involved, but like it's not mechanic forward. Therefore, like magic items aren't that necessary. And like
granted, I didn't play very much of it, and it was like a while ago, so I don't remember a ton. But yeah, it was definitely more social, political focused rather than like fighting and stabbing all the time.
In A Christmas Carol, when Death shows up, was he trying to remind people about, or the Scrooge, that he's a greedy bastard?
Can we just step that back? It's not Death. It's the
Death?
third spirit. It's technically the fourth spirit, but the third spirit of Christmas. It's future.
Is it evil?
He is represented as like a Grim Reaper, so he is.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I get what you're saying, but it's not. He's not coming to kill Scrooge.
Oh,
he's just there to show, hey, if you keep acting like a fool, then...
I just remember the Bill Murray version.
I appreciate that. That's the version that you remember, because Scrooge is an amazing film.
But what happens to him when he's reminded of being a greedy bastard, right? He has to look back on the dark time when he was a bastard.
That's what the other ones did. But the death one shows him or the death one. See, now you got in my head. Christmas Future shows him that what he has done with his life is of no worth in the long run, because he's just going to be dead. And so,
by analogy, the period I'm about to talk about is the period that was worthless and should not have been done. That's what I'm about. That's what I'm saying, right?
Wow.
That would be the.
I would just let you go with that segue.
So this is like when I started to play.
Yeah, well, it's just before, right? So like when I got introduced to actually, I think you started with third, so yes. But I got introduced to AD&D, and then shortly thereafter, TSR was destroyed and Wizards took over. Wizards, the owners of Magic the Gathering. So now the introduction then became a third edition. And at the time, we have things like MMORPGs reaching their zenith, RPGs. I mean, you had Baldur's Gate, which was cool around the time, but we had started to have MMORPGs in the 2000s taking shape. And, a lot of people will argue against me until they're blue in the face, but they're wrong. But there is documented evidence that the designers of both third and fourth took their inspiration from MMORPGs, and in particular, World of Warcraft. Fourth in particular, because third was about the same time as World of Warcraft was being created. But the idea here is that what third introduced it's more mechanical crunch to the system and more rules to make the system play in a gamey way. More systemization. One of the ways we see that happen, specifically with magic items, is that suddenly they have specific costs, more so than they did in previous editions. They're introduced, and now here's the most fatal part of it, the darkest part where the ghost comes back and says, "What the is there's
Not fatal as in the RPG. Different,
Oh, no.
very different topic.
But what they introduce is the idea that magic items are part of a progression of your gear. That as you become more powerful, you should expect to get magic items because they're part of how you build, and that's a hideous word, part of your build. So that this is where video game terminology enters the scheme. And again, I am giving negative terminology because I hate third edition. It killed my children. Okay. But what happened with magic items is they became more mechanical. And so we even see in the rules the introduction of like magic shops where you can buy them. So the results from critics like me is that magic items further lose their wonder. Whereas the 90s tried to recover them a bit from the Monty Hall situation, the 2000s washed all that away and said, hell, let's just put them in as gear, like bat gear all over your equipment. And that's what you get in the 2000s.
So what I hear a lot in conversation is that narrowing the martial caster divide is by giving the marshals magic items.
And which was true in the 70s.
Boost their thing. I mean, it seems like it's still true now. What I personally like, I like finding magic items. I hate buying. I mean, buying a magic item like it's a traveling or it's a weird thing you got to do it a separate quest to do it. Sure, that's fine. It should be special. It should be something. But like also like just like you're talking about the finding the +1 sword back in the 70s, how awesome it was. I was playing this paladin that was like based in 5e was based around being a control tank. I was based all around fear, all this stuff. And I luckily rolled, like randomly rolled off a loot table, like, and I got a +1 shield. It was like, it was Christmas. Like, because it was what I wanted, and it was lucky though. Like it wasn't like it was like something that was just waiting there for me. Like that cheapens it.
You couldn't go to the shop and buy the damn thing. You had to earn it.
But I think I tried to push before that to buy, but I literally did roll for it, like, or at least as far as my GM told me, I rolled for it. It was a random thing that happened. Like I went to search somewhere and he rolled, and it was that.
No, yeah, I don't like the idea of like ye old magic shop in RPGs at all. I don't know. It's like fine, I guess, if you run a game where they have like tons of gold to spend, whatever. But I much prefer it when it's like actually integrated into the design of the adventure. Or I don't know. I'm not even a fan too much of like really random things. Like it can work, but I definitely prefer it when it's like built into the plot and like fits the characters specifically.
Has significance to the buildings or everything.
As far as like magic shop for potions, sure. Components, definitely.
Consumables, whatever.
A quest to lead towards something, sure, why not? Like, hey, yeah, maybe if you went and got these materials, I could put this together for you. Like, I think that's cool. And same thing, Courtney. I do agree with you. Like, I love when it does happen that you randomly get something that is exactly what you need. That's great. But it does seem like this, just the general idea of quest, even if it's just a side quest, like that seems like the better way to get magic items, or like, you feel like you put something into it that reflected back onto you in that physical manifestation of the item.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're going to really love where we're going next then, Courtney.
Oh, okay.
Because now we're reaching the end of the 2000, just before 2010, 2008-ish, with the introduction of 4th edition. Now in 3rd, I didn't think I could hate D&D more because of what they did to me. But at least there were tables to convert the trashy 3rd edition stuff to 2nd edition. There were ways to do that, and it wasn't too bad. They were still cool ideas. They were still producing Dragon Magazine. It was in 3rd edition, so it was like reading this like weird language that I had to translate back to not stupid. But when 4th edition came out, you might as well set all of your Dragon Magazine on fire because nothing's compatible. 4th edition, to be fair, 4th edition did a wonderful job in taking systemization to a realm where everything was intricately balanced. And that was part of its goal. And 4th edition, more than any other, and again, I will be argued against, and you're wrong, took a lot of inspiration from MMORPGs, especially World of Warcraft. The designers admit this. And they had directives, in fact, to not compete with from marketing, but to borrow things from MMORPGs that players were familiar with and put them in the RPG. And so that's why we have a lot of things like tactical roles that we see codified in the actual rules of fourth edition. What fourth edition did elegantly is that it introduced math that balanced things, balanced the classes. And critics will say, myself included, that that also diluted their interestingness as a result. As far as magic items are concerned, though, it took the idea that magic items need to be part of your build to the nth degree, such that there was not just an expectation, but it was necessary that you would get certain kinds of magic items with certain power as you could progress. In fact, magic items had levels to them. So they were built into the math of the system.
Very video gamey.
And the fans of 4E will argue to the death with you against that. It's probably because they've never played second edition.
Are there fans of 4E?
Oh, there's a lot. There's a strange revival right now.
I've noticed that, yeah.
I would say that 4E walks so MCDM TTRPG could walk a little bit faster, but that's a level and no dissing Matt Colville and his nature in this community, but and it's fun from what I've seen, but also it's just 4E. It's 4E, right? It's literally
we gotta at least say that 4E for the first time in D&D's history admitted what it was. That it had become a tactical war game. And Draw Steel admits this on the first page. It says, look, if you're looking for something other than a tactical war game, play this other list of games. And they tell you. That's honest.
I appreciate that honesty.
And it does what it does really well, from what I understand, from what I've read. So 4E, in my mind, wasn't D&D at all, only in its coloration. But the spirit of D&D was there. The sense of wargaming was there. The focus on combat and tactics. But again, we have now completely lost, in my opinion, the wonder and magic of magic items. They're now literally just an implement that's part of your build. And that was the result of it.
I never actually played 4E, I don't think. My only real memory of it was flipping through the book and seeing the races that you could select and looking at the Dragonborn one. And it literally had a bullet point that was play a Dragonborn if you want to look like a dragon. And I was like, this game is not for me. I can't. It's just not for me.
See, I'm sold. You say that, I'm like, yes. I want to look like a dragon. Yes. Check.
I mean, this is also the time period now because of how we're all feeling, right? This is when the old school revival really reached its height. It was a reaction because of the direction of D&D. It was looking back to how do we adopt the old school play and bring back, among other things, that sort of wonder. And exploration. And so that's where the revival started, in a sense. Now, these dates I'm throwing out, I'm trying to be general. Look, if you're some D&D historian, go away. I don't care. My point is that they're
actually get in the comments.
Scathing comments about how wrong he is.
Any interaction's good, DQ.
Because I'm just trying to establish that there's this ebb and flow, naughty and nice, as we go through the decades. And that leads us now from the 2010s to where we are now, and with at least with Dungeons and Dragons. And I focus on D&D because it is, the heart, the through line of RPGs. It's 5e. And for all the things we can say about 5e, and I'm not necessarily totally positive on 5e, I think it's, of the editions we have, better than anything besides 2e, is that it tries to correct for some of these problems. So some of the things it does, it tries to divorce the idea of having requirement to have magic items from character progression. You could argue that you still need them, but if you look at the rules themselves, it divorces the necessity of magic items from character progression. So that's the first move it makes. The second move it makes, which we go all the way back to Earth Dawn, is that we have the idea of attunement. Now, I think realistically, the reason why that's there is to prevent you from having 17 magic items, which was the problem of third edition. But there is a bit of a lore reason for it, right? That there's a spiritual connection to your weapon, and that's why you can only have one or three connections or however many there are. That's the idea, is that it's trying to ground this abstract mechanical thing in the fiction. And that's a move that we used to do back in the day.
Anecdotally, completely anecdotal, I disagree with that because I never feel attuned with my attuned item. Or literally, you look at it, it's a mechanical slot, and I'm like, oh, I don't need to attune to that, but that's great, cool, and I can throw it around. Like now, I'm like thinking, how can D&D is like all 5e is all about like how can I cheese the system? Like that's literally like that's how you play the mechanics of the game. Like it's so specific, it's so trad. How do I work around that?
To be charitable is what I'm saying, is that at least they tried to give some sort of fictional grounding.
But that being said, I do agree with everything else you said about how, especially in the 1 to 10th, 11th, maybe 12th level, that magic items don't really matter that much. Like, sure, you should probably have, if you're a marshal, you should probably have +1 at least, if not +2, by level 7 or 8. But you don't have to have it. It's not, you're not dependent. Once you get higher up, it does become a bigger problem, especially with the martial caster divide, as I mentioned earlier. Like it does become a huge thing. But like I do find more often than not, with once again anecdotal, talking about our games, like I like start off a session and like I go through my inventory and I'm like, oh yeah, I have that thing. Oh yeah, I have that thing. Like what can I like bring into this session? Like maybe I'll like focus on 2 or 3 to like try to. So there are like you do have like the bag of gadgets, even though if you don't have a bag of holding, you still have a bag of gadgets of some sort, or and definitely the attuning process and the limitations to it, and the like the fact that Artificer gets an extra attunement slot, whatever. Like that's more. It's definitely a mechanical fun bit and like trying to figure out like what you really need. But I don't. It doesn't play off so much in the story aspect to me.
I think that you're pointing at a problem that 5e has, which a lot of people have pointed out, is that the mechanics aren't aligned with how it sells itself. And that is, it really doesn't have all the pillars it says it has. It has one big pillar and then tiny little sticks attached to that pillar. And that big pillar is the combat and tactics. And it has more to do with mechanics than anything else. You can do those other things, but the system as written, when we're talking about what's actually in the books, isn't about that. And so like, obviously in 2010 onward to now, this is 15 years, right? There are other systems, right? So some of the other systems at the time, at this development, 13th Age, what it did is to have magic items have these personality quirks that when you get an item, it's not just an item, you're also dealing with the personality. And so that's part of the sale here. Numenera, with the Cypher system, introduces these expendable trinkets of the past, that they're relics of the past, and you get a bunch of them and you have to expend them. You don't get to keep them. And then we have things like Dungeon World and the Fate system, and they try to demechanize magic items and turn them into tags that in a sense become part of your character. So there's a lot of moves being had during the 5e onward period where we're looking back to the past more extensively and reinventing it in the OSR, in the new OSR and new OSR, or the OSR adjacent games. And a lot of the PBTA derivatives and the narrative systems we're starting to see come into existence are looking back and saying, hey, how do we recover the narrative wonder of magic items while taking advantage of all the mechanical complexity that's evolved over 30, 40 years, or 50 years, I guess, at this point.
What are your thoughts on how Fatal handles magic items? No, I'm just kidding.
It depends on if you can fit it into an orifice. That's really how Fatal
It can always fit. It can always fit.
If you survive character creation.
Courtney, did you get your or did you buy it?
I did. It was 50 cents. It was like
yeah, you had to, right?
Yes.
And did it include the shipping?
Yeah, just 50 cents total. That's like the only reason I got it, because it was like, okay, this is just like a funny story to.
We're talking about the yearly sale.
We're not talking about anything. We're talking about Courtney came across.
But we're talking about the year. I guess it's a yearly sale now.
No, it's not even yearly. It's like.
Yeah, they hadn't done it since 2018, I think, which I had like seen that one too, but I never got anything from it.
I was going to call it Black Lives Matter, but that's not what it is. What is the card system called?
Oh my God.
Oh Lord.
Not that.
Cards Against Humanity. It's because I had the bigger blacker box. Remember, they sold that.
No, I have a bigger blacker box.
For the listeners, we all have bigger blacker boxes here.
But yes, it's a Black Friday sale that they started in 2018, then didn't do until again this year, where they sell things for 99% off. So you can get ridiculous deals.
I will say, at least on our account, since we're talking about magic items for OSR Plus, my intent and design for magic items, I obviously I have the books there where I've been drawing from that horrible catalog of the Monty Hall items from back then. But my intention was never to have a magic item that adds mechanical bonuses. I think there might be one or two, but it's in a vague sense, because every magic item for me, in order to be wondrous, should never speak to the mechanics. So they always do something weird, or they give you some new ability or way to manipulate reality. And you'll never find in our system a +1 sword.
I see. We're saying it doesn't add directly to a mechanical bonus. It's like, so I was thinking like there's certain weapons that definitely add to, but it's more like if they fit into the puzzle.
They never name a mechanic directly. Like they might say this weapon has bleeding or something, but they do something in particular. And part of the reason why I did that is because I do like to randomly roll an item and give it to a player if they found it, right? Because what that does for me, it's similar to what in our system, how we have random prompts. So we might encounter a scene and then I'll say, here's 2 prompts, a visual image and an idea. Explain, add something to the scene. Or maybe like we're doing session 0 with your character and I give you random prompts and you have to add this to your character. The idea is that juxtaposition, something I carried away from like poetry land, is the juxtaposition of 2 random things creates new stories that are unexpected. So in the same way, when someone finds a cracked teapot and it's a magic item, we don't know how that's going to change the story, because that cracked teapot may mean nothing to the player for the moment they put it in their inventory. Later, they identify it. But then strangely, at some critical moment later in the game, that teapot suddenly becomes critical because of what it can do. So you never know how they'll change the story. But to your point, I really like the idea, if you're going to give a character a particular item, that you do it with intention, that has something to do with their backstory or has something to do with where their character's going.
Well, I think it's the difference between finding random treasure versus being rewarded something. Like being rewarded something, like it seems like it should be more thematic, put into your
like Lord of the Rings.
nature. Well, yeah, exactly. Or same thing. Or as I say, like Great White North, I did the whole, like I gave you guys something that I thought felt that matched with each, and Courtney's character was coming in after that fact, and I was like, well, let me know what you think would work best for her, and I'll yay or nay it, just because like, and it was like yours like a ring that detects lying, and I was like, oh, great, like cool, that's a really weird, like I don't know how that's going to affect everything, but it's there now in the playing field.
I just love being surprised when I forgot I gave someone something and they bring it into the scene and I'm like, what? I'm usually like excited though too.
To that point, like I had said previously, I don't really care when you like randomly pick up stuff, but it can be fun. Like I am the type of person in both TTRPGs and in like video game RPGs, like Fallout and Elder Scrolls and stuff. I'll just haul around for like the entire game and never use it. And I just have this like mountain of like fancy potions and stuff in my bag. But yeah, that happened recently in God Beyond when I've been carrying these, they're called dimensional beads around for like 20 sessions or something and just kept not using them. And then all of a sudden it was like, I can use this. This is the exact perfect spot for it.
It's awesome, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I think, to further build on your point, even when you find something random, like I think it's incumbent on the GM, if they care about making these items feel wondrous, to impart a sense of lore with them, even if they're random. How I could have made those dimensional beads, which are borrowed to some degree from Tui, like more interesting from a lore point of view, is if in identifying them and using them, you learn something about the world or how they were created, because now they have more value to you narratively, and you'll remember them to use them even more. As opposed to, like John was saying, you start the session looking through your stuff to see what might be tactically helpful, right? So here it's more like, oh, I remember those beads because when the wizardess, Lysandra, was trapped in the vault and was dying without breath, she used the beads to trap some air so she could last a few more minutes and she escaped. And then you could think in that moment where you're trying to escape these soldiers that it applies.
Good to know that I can do that with those.
Oh, I don't even know. I'm pretty sure if you did that, you'd probably die faster, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, you just get stuck in there and that, yeah.
You can figure it out.
But yeah, like I said, I didn't used to care about treasure and magic stuff that much, probably because of the whole issue of ye old magic shop that for some reason exists in like every shitty little town with peasants, where you can like for some reason buy some fancy armor for like 5,000 gold and completely destroy the economy. But I digress. But I have shifted my mindset over the years, and like I'm still very much a character focused player. I get a lot more satisfaction from like interactions and conflicts and growth, and less satisfaction from mechanics. No offense, John. But I have seen some really cool uses of magic items over the years, and that can like tie in with character growth and progression too, especially where leveling up doesn't happen very often. So like in OSR Plus, for example, you only have levels 1 through 10, so leveling up is pretty rare. And with GMs that I played with in the past, they were pretty sparse with how they handed out levels. One that really stands out in my mind is from a game that our friend Rob from World Built With Us, that podcast, ran years and years ago. He was using Pathfinder, but in a homebrew setting. And for context, I started playing D&D at like 3.5, then Pathfinder. So I have zero experience with second edition. Sorry, Daniel. Anyway, it was like an urban campaign, lots of like political intrigue and a lot of secret occult things showing up. And I was playing an inquisitor named Iskanda, who is very justice oriented and like literally worshipped a goddess named Her Lady Justice, and she had a long sword, and I think it might have just been like a +1 sword, but it was just a sword. Until we had this really, really rough encounter with a demon that might have actually taken place in like a dream state or like some alternate dream-like plane. I don't remember a ton of details about the fight, but it was rough, and most of the party ended up getting knocked out. And at the last second, either I used my sword or another character picked it up and used it to deal the killing blow to this demon. And rather than just being like, cool, congrats on killing this demon, like now it's a +2 longsword, Rob changed it considerably because of the fact that it had killed this like really powerful mystical thing. The blade became pitch black because it had been plunged into demon blood, which is pretty sick. And then I think it was like a combination of Iskanda's emphasis on justice and truth and then the demon's emphasis on lies. Now it had the power that whenever I dealt damage with it, the target would be compelled to speak a truth out loud, which had a lot of interesting consequences later in the campaign. But I don't know, changing its appearance like that and giving it a new power that like actually integrated with the lore and the character was such a cool way to provide a reward for having that killing blow. Like if you just said it's a +2 now, or like here's a brand new item you found, it would have been as memorable. So my stance on magic items is like try to fold them into the lore as much as you can and into the characters, like make them make sense. Of course, he talks about like, yes, it's fine to stumble across random things that can be fun and satisfying. But if you want to have your players have that kind of like, yeah, this is a sweet moment, like do something, I don't know, integrate it more, like get their weapon infused with some power because of something they just slayed, or their armor absorbs something because it blocked a certain spell, or even like if your characters have been seeing a villain appear throughout the campaign, like doing horrible things with a certain weapon, and like they finally defeat him and then get that weapon for themselves, that would be pretty cool. And also like appealing to the player's interest and the character's interest. Like, I don't know, you've kind of done this in Great White North a little bit, John, maybe. But like giving, if a character is a devout follower of a certain god, it would be sweet if they ended up with like a relic from that god, or like something that the god had blessed themselves.
It's just making it more personal, like making it like it's not just an item, it's not just a stat, it's something that like, and that's what DQ was saying about like how the original attunement started, is that you had to know the lore, you had to know what was up with it. And I feel like a lot of that is lost in 5e, but there's the other side of the coin, which I tend to flip, is that our GM in our 5e game will say stuff like, oh, okay, here's a immovable rod. I'm like, yep, give me that. I know exactly what to do that because I've read like 5 million things I want to do with that. And then same thing, like I did some weird side quest when we were already out of the Tomb of Annihilation. We should have been just going home. And I got the alchemist jug, which allows you to have like a mayo once a day if you want. But there's so many things you can do with that. Like it's crazy. It's just like, oh, this is a magic little tesseract.
that speaks to the two types of spice you can put on magic items, right? You can put on your magic item the spice of narrative to make it interesting, and you can put on the spice of what weird thing can it do. And the third thing you can put is mechanics as well. Like so I think that's different than a purely mechanical benefit.
The plus whatever is
It's the
what it
boring
is.
one, right?
It's
It
what
can
it
be
is.
there, but it's
Boring.
not. It depends on the
It's boring.
system.
But in some systems require it, and that's fine. But it is what it is. It's boring, and like I think in that sense, as going to the GMs, the two GMs that are listening to this podcast right now, but like if you want to give that to your player, if your players need that, maybe take a little bit of Courtney's story and allow it to become something more than just a powerful weapon found, but maybe it's something forged in the blood of your enemies or something, or in friendship. I don't know, whatever
Not friendship, definitely blood of enemies.
I mean, item evolution is a really cool concept that if there's room for that in a system design, that's something to explore, because then these items become wondrous as your players or as your characters become wondrous. And that's something we don't always see.
And crafting items too. I feel like we don't really see that much, which is interesting because like thinking back to Pathfinder and D&D, they had skills that were like crafting, you can do it, but nobody ever did that.
I'm in mixed situations that like I definitely think if a player wants to craft something and they have put in effort to be a crafter of some sorts, whether they're a blacksmith or their backstory or whatever, like I think that's really cool. Another interesting thing that I don't know really how this applies to what we're talking about, but maybe we could spin into a conversation. Is I finished playing the game Liza Pi, Liza P, not Liza P, Liza P, not Liza Pi, Liza P. So yeah. But one of the cool things they do is that they have a crafting system where most weapons is the blade and the handle, and you can switch. You can like alternate and do different blades, different handles, and like combos, and like you find like the right combo that works for you, like the style of like the weapon hits, whatever. And like I love like that concept of like tailoring something to yourself. Like I found this, and now I'm going to make it my own and call it my own. Like I think
I like that. That's
really
like cool. Fit on the umbrella of crafting in a sense.
Yeah, that's it's a
like
different version of crafting.
Customization, I guess, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like remember Final Fantasy, how you could like slot things into your weapons? It's a similar concept where you're tailoring it to your
just calling it your own. Like I think that's really important to players, certain types of players. And I feel like that's something a different way to look at magic items. Like, oh, okay, what if you have this thing that you love? How can you enhance it? Like how can we involve that into the current story where it's not a whole side quest, it have to be like a whole separate thing, but like how do we pull that into
like a magic shop in a village, maybe you come across, I don't know, resources on or texts on like enchanting weapons or something, and end up having to do it yourself, or come across a wizard who can help you out with that.
Instead of a magic shop, you find someone that is a craftsman or something that can kind of, yeah, no, I love that.
In Lord of the Rings, like, so the gesture you made that we were talking about in Great White North is similar to the gesture that's made when the magic items are given to the hobbits, right? They're not really tailored, but they're tailored to their journey from a narrative perspective. And in a sense, you do the same thing where they're tailored to what our characters are striving to accomplish in a sense. Like I could argue if you wanted to, like that the bracers I have metaphorically represent my desire to protect others, right? So there's ways you can spin that to make it narratively meaningful for the larger story. Oh, there's one other thing I wanted to bring up too that I feel like has totally gone nowadays from RPGs with respect to magic items. I think back to older editions, AD&D and earlier, but when you rolled at a random table, you could roll something insane and get it in your hands. The most egregious example from the earliest editions of D&D is the Deck of Many Things. But it still exists, but you could, and it's still way tamer than it used to be. It used to be like campaign destroying, but you could, oh yeah, crazy.
I think it still is though. I think it's still
was way worse.
I will appreciate your whatever knowledge you have.
I looked at it in 5e and I'm like, wow, that's manageable. But what it used to do in the past was crazy. But you could also get crazy swords in your hands just by randomly acquiring them. And so where I'm going is like, it's lost the idea that an item could be so powerful and so wondrous that it could disrupt the balance of the adventure. And I think there's good reason for that, right? There's more gamification as time went on. So we can't afford to give you like a sort of ultimate destruction and first level. But on the flip side, what would happen if you had the sort of ultimate destruction at first level? What stories could you tell if you were the farmer who got the sword of ultimate destruction in your hands? I mean, maybe that sword came from someplace and someone's looking for it, and now
If
you have
you're in
it.
a completely sandbox kind of situation and campaign, you're just rolling shit, like that makes a lot of sense. It could work out. But like,
Is that not
if,
the story of Lord of the Rings?
I mean,
He finds the ring.
distill it down to
to
that.
rule all
Yes, it
others.
is, but it's not. There's so much more to that about the planning between Sauron and the. Sorry.
From the Hobbit's perspective.
Why were the hobbits ever considered to begin with? Just saying. Like, what the fuck?
Because they were the ones that could mediate greed.
Why didn't they just put the ring around a fucking like donkey and just pull them along? Like, there's so many questions. We're not going to get into it.
I did want to bring up, that makes me think of, I think C.R. Rowenson at one point had told me about a solo RPG that of course I'm blanking on the name of, but it was something where like you followed the story of an item through the ages. Like you wrote down its history and that sort of thing. And I could definitely see something like that working with like a sword of ultimate power that just falls into random people's hands and like, well, this guy just blew himself up right away, or yeah, this guy held on to it for like 30 years and then he accidentally chopped his own head off. Like,
are you playing as the item in this RPG?
yeah, I think it's like, I don't know, just describing like what happens with it.
Sounds like you're like the narrator. Right?
Yeah, it's like a solo story.
Obviously, which is to John's point, like it takes the right kind of system to do that sort of thing. But I think there are stories that we're not telling anymore because our systems are handcuffing us. And this is even true of our system. I can't just drop into the OSR book a sort of ultimate destruction that could be part of the randomized table, because there is a sense of gaminess in our system too that hews towards the sort of games that are out today. But maybe there's additional rules that could allow that. Maybe there's an expanded book that could talk about crafting or things like that. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, this actually does remind me of a story that my brother told me many years ago about, I think he was like in college playing D&D. I'm not sure which version, maybe second, but it was like somebody in his party had come across like a sentient sword that would just like stay still wherever you put it. And it was working out fine until they were fighting on a ship and the guy let it go in the air and it was just hanging there and it cut through the mast of the ship. So then they were just kind of floating out in sea.
That's amazing. I mean, it's like think of like in old school D&D, the spell Wish was horrifically insane back then, and now it has a very specific things it can do, and it's not a concern really. But Wish in the past is a spell that should never have been in the spell book, yet it's a thing that people can have. Like, and I suppose you earned it because you somehow survived to get that spell. But that's like a different story. Like you could tell crazy stories because of that, you know?
No, it's game breaking in a lot of ways. It's
yeah. You remember when if you cast the spell teleport, there was a percentage chance that you would teleport into something?
For other planes too, right? Was that a thing?
Do we want to play in that world?
Kids these days have it so easy. So it seems like there's, a storied history of magic items, and that we all have differing opinions when they should come into play and how they should come into play. And I think it's very campaign dependent, correct? And the main thing is like, don't let your players bully you, because that shows that you're weak. You cannot be weak as GM. You must be strong.
Visit them, go back in time and visit them as the death thing and tell them that they're terrible.
Ghost of Christmas Future is the word you're looking for, but yes, the death thing.
I would be so curious to see your rendition of A Christmas Carol.
Of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol?
Yeah.
Actually, can we go through that really quickly?
Okay, I think there's a rich guy who's awful, and he's like, oh, my life sucks, or my life is so great, but I'm such a bastard, and he regrets something.
I don't think he knows that.
Yeah, he doesn't give a shit.
No,
he's like a shitty person, and then something happens, and Death shows up, and Death is like, You're a person.
Wait. Time
I'm
out.
going to show you.
More than something happens before the third.
Some kid gets hit by a car or something,
Oh
and
my
then
God.
Death shows up and he's like, "You suck.
Are you
I'm going to show
literary
you how much
major?
you
Like-
suck. I'm going to take you to the past and I'm going to spank you." And so then he meets all these evil ghosts. These evil ghosts show up and they're all like, "Ooh, you're terrible." And then he regrets everything he's done. And then stuff happens and he gives all his money away and then it's over. That's it. Thanks for listening to That RPG Podcast, where every great adventure starts with a single idea. Join us next week for more from our series, Naughty or Nice, where we share tips on how to keep your magic items magical, interview Keith Amon, author of Making Enemies, and embark on an adventure to save Christmas in a hard-boiled detective mystery set at the North Pole. See you next time.